Hey guys, today we're going to be learning about ratios. Make sure your notebook is out and that you're ready to take notes. So before we start talking about ratios, I really want to review what a fraction is. So remember, a fraction names a part of a whole or a part of a group. So for example, down below where you see those 3 hexagons, you could say that 1/3 of the hexagons are red, since 1 out of 3 pieces are red. One of the really cool things about ratios is that ratios are very similar to fractions. A ratio is a comparison of 2 numbers using division. Now that part right there saying using division can be a little bit confusing. When it says using division, it just means it can be using a fraction bar, which we know when we divide 2 numbers together can tell us how those 2 numbers relate. So it is a comparison of 2 numbers using a fraction bar. We are comparing 2 things. And there are 3 different ways that a ratio can be written. As you can see here, you could use a colon. So again, if we were still comparing the red shapes to the blue shapes, it would be 1 to a total of 3. Or you could use words, the word 2, indicating that you're talking about a ratio. And lastly, you can use a fraction bar. So I want you to think, if we're able to use a fraction bar, what does that mean fractions are? If you were going to say that fractions are ratios, you would be completely correct, because ratios often behave like fractions because you can make them a part to whole comparison. In that sense, fractions are ratios. Here's an example right here. It says the ratio of red octagons, so the total number of octagons would be 2 to 3. Because there are 2 red, that is the part, and the whole group is 3. That makes this particular ratio like a fraction. Here are some examples of part-to-whole ratios in everyday life. So in sports, teams making 10 out of 18 baskets at a basketball game. Maybe the number of girls, the total number of students in class. Or lastly, quiz scores. I earned 25 out of 30 total points on a quiz. However, ratios can be different than fractions, and here is why. In a ratio, you can compare part-to-part comparisons. So they do behave a little bit differently than a fraction does sometimes. So this example would be comparing the ratio of the red octagons to the purple octagons. So notice how we indicate that it is a ratio of 2 to 1. So this ratio compares the red part to the purple part. So neither number in this ratio represents a whole. Therefore, it's not a fraction. It's also very important that you write your ratio in the correct order. Notice how we wrote 2 to 1 because it asked red to purple. If you were to select 1 to 2, that would be an incorrect ratio because the way it asks for it was red to purple, not purple to red. And lastly, here are some part-to-part ratios that you might see in everyday life, such as recipes. You need 2 eggs, 2 every 3 cups of sugar. That really works when you're making multiple batches to make more. Mixing paint, 1 part blue to 3 parts yellow to get the correct color you want. Final score to a football game, 43 to 8, one team compared to another. Number of girls to boys in a class. Okay, notice how right here when it's comparing the number of girls to number of boys in a class, it also simplified the ratio. Ratios can be simplified just like fractions can, and that really helps us out to know kind of what the odds are in a much easier way. So if there's 15 girls for every 12 boys, or if that's the ratio, the other ratio, the simplified ratio, would be 5 girls to 4 boys. That would be a simplified ratio in that class. So now what I want you guys to do is to do the 5-question Google Classroom homework assignment.